I work at a gas station in the center of my town. My shifts aren't always the same, but I find myself on overnights and early mornings most of the time. I'd been there for a whole year at this point, and honestly, I didn't have many negative things to say about it. It was just a normal mid-paying job that only required me to stand in one spot for 8 hours and talk to the occasional customers. On this day, I was working an overnight shift, the typical 10 to 6. Although it's usually not too busy overnight on the weekdays, it's worth mentioning that it was raining a decent amount this night, so I was expecting it to be a pretty quiet night. The first couple hours, I sat at a chair behind the register and just waited for anyone to come in. I got a few people that paid for gas with cash, but by 12:30 or 1ish, it was pretty much dead. No customers coming inside, and barely anyone even getting gas outside. Now, with absolutely no customers, I went around the counter and started fixing up the shelves a bit. They weren't too bad, but it was just a way to keep myself busy. As I was doing this, I had my back facing the windows, but I saw headlights glare through the store as someone pulled into the pumping stations. I didn't look because there was nothing interesting about it, just some guy pulling in to get gas. I kept on with tidying up the shelves for maybe 10 or so minutes before I unconsciously glanced out the window. The car was still there by one of the pumps, with a man standing right next to it, and as soon as I looked, the man shifted away, making it obvious that he was looking at me. After seeing that, I felt really weirded out, especially since they'd been there, supposedly pumping gas for a whole 10 minutes. I went back to the counter, then checked out the window again 30 seconds later, seeing the man getting in his car. The headlights flashed a few times, like he was trying and failing to turn it on, but he eventually got it running and drove away in a hurry. I stood there and just looked out the window for a minute, and something just really didn't seem right. I got an idea and pulled up the recent transactions for the pump he was at. The last time it was used was hours ago. He was there for 10 minutes with no reason at all other than watching me through the windows. I stayed behind the counter for a while, trying to just wait out the rest of my shift. A few more cars came and went, and then it got really quiet again for a while. And around 3 a.m., I heard something outside. The rain was heavy, but a rhythmic shuffling noise on the ground was barely audible through it. Footsteps right along the side of the building, moving toward the back. I tried to look out the window, but there was no good view. I did notice that no cars were in the parking lot or by the pumps though. I quickly left the counter and went to the back door, which was a heavy metal door that had no windows or anything on it. I pressed my ear against it and listened as the footsteps got louder and louder until they were right on the other side of the door. My eyes moved to the handle, waiting in the silence before the handle turned slowly and slightly, but getting caught by the lock. It went quiet again. Almost a whole minute passed, then a man's voice grunted in frustration as a sudden sharp sound slid across the other side of the door. Footsteps followed soon after, leaving and going back to the side of the gas station. I ran back to the front, waiting to see them walking away, but didn't get any sight of them. Acting quickly, I picked up the store phone and dialed 911, hoping they could catch him before he got too far. I didn't know what was really happening, but someone trying to get in through the back door had to have intended something bad. When cops arrived, they didn't find the man, but what they did find was a car on the side of the road less than a quarter mile away. The same car I'd seen earlier with the man who was watching me. It had run out of gas and had mismatching license plates. Turned out to be some guy's missing car from 2 states over. The other thing they found was a long scrape across the back door, made by a sharp metal object, likely a knife. Knowing all these details, I think I actually got extremely lucky, as the man was probably on the run already and could have been planning anything.
Hey everyone, we truly appreciate your support. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel for more upcoming stories and exciting content.
For the past couple years, I've had the same job. I'm a janitor for a popular fast food restaurant. I don't take orders or anything at all aside from cleaning. I don't even see other workers a lot of the time because I'm scheduled overnight. At the restaurant, everything needs to be deep cleaned every day, and during open hours, it's basically impossible to do. I'd never had anything happen during my shifts, aside from the occasional customer knocking on the window asking if we're open. So on this night, I came in and got to work like I usually did. A couple other employees were still there when I got there, but by 10, which was an hour after closing, it was just me for the rest of the night. I popped in my headphones and started scraping the grills and prepping everything that needed to be hosed down. After a while, I lost track of time, but my best guess is that it was around 12 a.m. when I heard a knock at the front of the building. I pulled off my headphones, hearing it again. I walked to the front, expecting someone at the door, wanting to see if we were closed, but when I looked, nobody was there. I went up to the door and looked out at the parking lot. No cars or people. I knew I'd heard it from this side of the building though, so I waited for it again, but there was nothing. I ended up thinking I just mistook another sound for knocking, and I went back to work. Another hour or so went by, then I took a lunch break. I grabbed my lunch bag and sat at one of the tables in the middle of the dining area, taking my time since I was actually ahead on my cleaning. Once I finished eating, I went to the back and turned to grab the mop, only to see a man's face staring at me from outside the drive-thru window. He had messy hair and a blank face, but his eyes had something strange about them, like they were empty. I froze up for a second, and after a moment, the man calmly turned and walked away. My heart was racing in my chest, and I just stood in place, listening to his departing footsteps. I didn't know what to think. It was just incredibly creepy and strange. Once I got my confidence back, I opened the window and looked out to make sure he'd left. It was dark beyond the lights of the restaurant, but I didn't see anyone, so I closed it up and locked it. I was on edge for the next hour, constantly looking behind me at the windows, feeling like I was being watched. But as my shift was coming to an end, I started to feel some relief and the anxiety calmed down. One of the last few things I had to do was roll all the garbage bags out to the dumpster, which I was avoiding as long as I could. I checked the window before I stepped out, and it looked clear, so I quickly opened the door and got the garbage out. I started tossing them one by one into the dumpster, but not even 20 seconds in, the man appeared from around the corner. I stopped what I was doing and quickly asked what he needed. He didn't respond as he walked up to me and had that same empty stare. Now that I could see his whole body though, he was even more terrifying, being a fairly large man and wearing a dirty and stained coat. Not knowing what else to do, I ran for the door. I opened it as the man's footsteps rushed up behind me, and as I slammed the door shut, the man was able to stick his arm into the gap, preventing it from closing. I turned and sprinted to the other end of the restaurant, getting my keys out and unlocking the front door as fast as I could while hearing the man closing the distance on me. I barely got away again and ran before he got to me. I sprinted across the parking lot and as far as I could while calling the police. 5 minutes later, the police got to the restaurant. The man was gone. We got footage on the CCTVs, but no identity could be made of it. It also showed that as soon as I ran away, the man just stayed there and watched me for a bit, then left out the back door. What he wanted from me is unknown, but his creepy and objectively horrifying behavior gives me chills even to this day.
For a little backstory, this all took place when COVID-19 had shut everything down in March 2020. I was sent home from my college and I had to deal with Zoom classes, and I also went back to work at the burger joint that I would work at whenever I was home on breaks. I won't say the name of the place, but it was always very busy, and during COVID it made us even busier due to us being a fast food place, so we never had to close down, but other places in the plaza did. We always had some really crazy and nasty people, but the pandemic just made everyone so much worse. At the time, we had this one regular that would come in who we thought had some mental problems multiple times a week. He would be really emotionless in his talking and just gave really blank dead stares towards everyone, and just stood there like a gargoyle, really intimidating and statuesque. He would ride his bike up to the walk-up area and look through the sliding windows until one of us got to taking his order. But he only really liked certain people to take his order and was also very cold towards us. He would order the same thing every time, but wants it fresh right out of the grease and handled by once again only certain people. And to make sure of it, he'll intensely stare at us through the pickup window. He would make the other customers outside so uncomfortable that they would walk away or they would just sit in their cars until he left. He used to only come in during the day shifts, but because days were much busier than the night shifts, and with all his demands that he would give us every time, my manager got fed up and told him to no longer come here during the day, thus now making him a night shift problem. During the week, I would work night shifts because of class, and I would usually be clocking out by 10 p.m. It was around 9:30 and I was closing my side down and starting to clean when he then rolled up on his bike. I happened to be one of the few people he let take his order, so as usual I took his order. He wants everything completely fresh, the standard list of demands. But one demand he gave was new. He always orders a side of fries with his meal, and sometimes to put the fries in the carton we either use a scooper or tongs. He asked us to use the scooper instead of the tongs because it'll give him more fries. Me just wanting him to leave and being close to leaving myself, I just went over and told the fry guy what he wanted. The fry guy just rolled his eyes, knowing how annoying this guy is, and dropped some new fries in the grease for him. The fry guy went on a break shortly after, and the night manager took over a station and waited for the fries to be ready. She didn't know it was this guy though, and she used the tongs to put the fries in the carton. She then hands me the order to pass out. The guy slides open the window, and he told me that she didn't do what he asked and that he wants more fries in his bag, since it looked like she didn't put enough in, which she put plenty in. He just didn't get his way. Once again, just wanting to leave after I'm done with him, I just oblige and go back. My coworker who I'm going to call E calls back and says that I shouldn't let him do that. I then called back saying that we've been letting him control us for months, and it's not my problem to handle a manager's problem if he has issues. My night manager hears this and sees it's the guy at the window. They then groan and they ask me what the issue is with him this time. I explained to her the story and she went up to him and told him that it makes no difference what she does. He's getting his order fresh every single time by the people he wants to make his order, so to just suck it up and take the bag. She hands him the bag and then storms in the back to finish her inventory. The guy then pokes his arm and head in the window and tries to get one of the other coworkers to remake his order. Coworker and I both said that we're not going to do that since there was nothing even wrong with his food. Well, he doesn't like this, and he actually throws his bag of food inside the store and spills it all over the floor. He sees this and absolutely loses it. She runs over to the window that he's still in and then screams at him how he can't disrespect us like this, and that we for sure won't be remaking his order now, but we'll give him his money back. He then screams at her, and they actually go at it for a few minutes. I call up the night manager and she runs up to also scream at him. As he gives the guy back his money, he actually grabs her arm and then yanks her almost through the window. Now, because of the pandemic, we have these plastic dividers at the top of where the customer would be speaking to, so if that wasn't there, she would have went straight through the window. Now everyone is screaming at this guy to get the hell out of there and that we're calling the cops as he just assaulted a minor. Earlier that week, E had racial slurs screamed at her by a bunch of rednecks because she was black. I felt really bad for her dealing with two big issues that happened in such a short period of time. She broke out of his grasp and ran to the back. The guy didn't even leave. In his crazy, twisted mind, he thought he was in the right here. He was running in circles outside of our walk-up area and was actually screaming to himself about E and how he's gonna set the cops on us. He tries banging on the windows to further get our attention, but we just ignored him. 4 cop cars drove in, blocking the entrance and the exit of the drive-thru so that no one can come in or leave. They talked to him and the guy just isn't grasping that he attacked a minor and he's crazy. The owner of the company sends in the security footage of just what happened to the cops, and we set the guy on trespassing. The guy actually had to be escorted off the property because he wouldn't leave. He thankfully hasn't come in since that day, but we still see him riding around the road next to our place, and he gives us menacing looks every time he passes by, not once breaking eye contact. He really wasn't right in the head. The dead stares he would give us through the windows, the emotionless way he would speak to us, how picky he was with everything, and how quick he snapped and resorted to violence. It was insane. Very fortunately, E didn't get any injuries from the incident and was only shaken up, but she did quit a few weeks later, and I can't really blame her. I feel really bad for her. No one should ever have to deal with being assaulted by customers or having racial slurs spewed at them. She was way too young to have to deal with that.
This is something I've never really told anyone about, but I've been thinking about it a lot lately, so here it is. A few years back, 2015 or 2016, when I was 18 or 19, I used to work at a little cafe inside a car parts factory. It was basically a full-out but compact restaurant kitchen and lunchroom for the workers to eat there. Well, this one day, I get a call from my best friend, coworker. She's all kinds of upset because of this new creepy temp worker that made her feel severely uncomfortable by asking her a bunch of personal questions, like what she drove, where she lived, if she was single, had any kids, when she got off work, etc. She didn't want to walk out to her car alone. Mind you, she was my age too, 18 or 19, and this dude was in his mid to late 30s, if not already in his 40s. And we're in Flint, Michigan, so we weren't about to take our chances. I drove up to the parking lot, found her car, parked next to it, and she has a security guard escort her out. We didn't see the guy then, but she described him to me and the security guard, and that was that for a few days. Someone found him and told him to stay away from her, and he did. But then he met me. I knew exactly who he was as he stepped up to the register to place his lunch order, just from the description I had been given and by the creepy vibes he was giving off. He pulled the same intense Q&A on me that he had done to my friend too. But instead of telling him to fuck off or calling security or anything like that, I just told him a bunch of straight up lies. I told him I drove a blue 2012 Honda Civic, which I knew for a fact was one of the second shift manager's vehicle, who always parked near the front of the building. I also told him that my shift ended at 9:30, which was really the time that I usually slipped out for a cigarette break. So when 9:30 hit later that night, I walked out to smoke a cigarette and saw exactly what I was expecting to see. That stupid creep in the parking lot, close to the area that the Honda Civic was parked. He was just pacing back and forth between two vehicles that was parked a few spaces down in the same row, playing on his phone the entire time. At one point, he glanced up and saw me staring at him, but I had my big leather winter coat on and a hat, so I don't know if he recognized me at first from the distance or not. I finished my smoke and went back inside and explained the entire situation to the security guards, one of which was the original guard that had escorted my friend out to her car a couple days before, and they were dying laughing at the fact that I pulled one over on this prick and had actually caught him being shady. I'm not sure exactly what they did about it, but I do know they immediately went out to confront him in the parking lot, and that the guy was fired the same week. To this day, I still don't know what his intentions were, but it doesn't take a genius to figure out that it couldn't have been anything good. So ultimately, the moral of the story is always have your friends back and trust your instincts, because if you don't, you could end up cornered in a parking lot and possibly attacked or abducted by a creepy guy who asked you too many questions. Edit, since I didn't include this originally. After my friend and I were informed that this guy was fired, we were told his full name, and my friend paid to do a background check on him. It came back with a violent criminal history of domestic abuse, assault, and battery with a weapon, jail time served for violating a PPO and parole, and some other things.